If you wanted to design the perfect person to have a near-death experience, a person whose account would be impossible to dismiss, you would design Dr. Eben Alexander, a Harvard-trained neurosurgeon. 25 years of operating on human brains, a man who had spent his entire career explaining to patients why their near-death experiences were hallucinations, why the tunnel and the light were oxygen deprivation, why the deceased relatives were the dying brain constructing comfort. He knew exactly why none of it was real. Then it happened to him. On the morning of November 10th, 2008, Dr. Alexander woke with a headache, unlike anything he had experienced. Within hours, he was in the emergency room. The diagnosis was bacterial meningitis caused by E. coli bacteria that had somehow crossed the blood-brain barrier and were, in his own words, eating into his brain like acid. His neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for all conscious thought, memory, language, and perception, was being destroyed. He went into a coma. The bacteria were consuming the very organ that his entire career said was the source of consciousness. His doctors gave him less than a 10% chance of survival. They were clear that if he somehow survived, he would almost certainly spend the rest of his life in a nursing home with permanent neurological damage. For 7 days, his EEG showed essentially no cortical activity. His brain, by every standard medical measure, was not functioning. As a neurosurgeon, he knew better than anyone what that meant. There should have been nothing, no experience, no consciousness, no awareness. The lights should have been completely off. Dr. Alexander describes his experience in 3 distinct phases. The first he calls the realm of the earthworm's eye view, darkness, primitive, a muddy, underground world with no light and no sense of self, roots and soil and dim awareness. He had no memory of being human, no memory of his name, his career, his family, just existence in its most basic form. He later understood this as the deepest layer, with consciousness stripped of everything. Then a spinning white light appeared, like a melody, he said, opening up a passage that took him out of the darkness and into something completely different. He describes emerging into a vast, rich world of light and color and sound, a countryside of extraordinary beauty, rolling green meadows, trees, flowers, waterfalls, living light, not reflected light like sunlight, but light that was itself alive and conscious. He was riding on a butterfly wing. Beside him, on the butterfly wing, was a young woman, high cheekbones, deep blue eyes, golden hair with hints of copper. She was radiating a feeling he described as pure love, not romantic love, but something deeper and more fundamental than anything he had experienced in his life. She communicated with him not in words, but in what he describes as a flow of communication that contained vastly more information than language. She said 3 things. You are loved and cherished. You have nothing to fear. There is nothing you can do wrong. He felt them, not as words, but as absolute truth. Beyond the gateway was what he calls the core, pure light, pure consciousness, a darkness that was somehow also the source of all light. He describes a being, not a figure with a body, but an infinite presence that communicated to him the nature of existence. That love is the basis of everything, that he needed to return, that there was more for him to understand and share. He had no desire to return. He felt more alive, more real, more completely himself than he had ever felt in 54 years of physical life. Dr. Alexander was adopted. He grew up knowing nothing of his biological family. Years later, as an adult, he searched for his birth parents. He found them, but learned that his biological sister, Betsy, had died before he could meet her. He never saw a photograph. He never learned what she looked like. He knew only her name. 4 months after he woke from his coma, a relative sent him a photograph. It was his biological sister, Betsy, the woman on the butterfly wing, the high cheekbones, the deep blue eyes, the golden hair with hints of copper. The unconditional love was his sister, a sister he had never seen, a sister who had died before they could meet. He had described her in exact detail, in a coma, with no functioning neocortex, without ever having seen her face. On the 7th day, Dr. Alexander opened his eyes. His recovery was, by his medical team's own assessment, miraculous. The type of bacterial meningitis he had, gram-negative E. coli meningitis in an adult, has a mortality rate approaching 90%. Those who survive almost always have permanent neurological damage. He recovered fully, his memory intact, his surgical skills intact, his personality intact. His doctors had no medical explanation for the recovery. Dr. Alexander spent the years after his recovery doing what any scientist would. He attempted to disprove his own experience. He went through every neurological explanation: hallucinations from drugs, REM intrusion, hypoxia, temporal lobe activity. He knew these arguments better than almost anyone alive, and one by one, because of the specific conditions of his case, because of the verified EEG records, and because of the documented absence of cortical activity, he could not make any of them fit. He concluded that consciousness exists independently of the brain, not as a belief. As a scientific hypothesis, he could not disprove. Dr. Eben Alexander is not a mystic. He is not a preacher. He is a neurosurgeon who spent 25 years knowing exactly why near-death experiences are impossible. His own brain was then shut down completely, verified by continuous EEG monitoring, and he came back with memories of a woman he had never seen, whose photograph arrived 4 months later and matched his description exactly. He did not choose this experience. He spent years trying to explain it away. He could not. That is the entirety of what we know. Beyond, clinical follows the evidence, and the evidence is extraordinary.